9 SUVs on this list share one thing almost nobody talks about: owners who've had them past 200,000 miles without a single major repair. That's not luck. That's engineering. Let's start with the one mechanics themselves keep buying: Toyota Land Cruiser. Independent shops across the country will tell you the same thing when you ask which used SUV they'd trust blind. The Land Cruiser comes up first, almost every time. It's not flashy anymore. Toyota stopped chasing trends with this one decades ago and just kept refining the same formula. Overbuilt drivetrain, simple electronics, a suspension designed for punishment. Fleet data from taxi and government agencies overseas, where Land Cruisers get driven into the ground on terrible roads for a decade straight, backs this up consistently. The catch? Depreciation is almost non-existent, which means the used market punishes you on price even as it rewards you on reliability. You pay for the peace of mind up front, but that's exactly the trade a driver over 40 usually wants: fewer surprises, even if the initial number stings a little. Lexus GX. Built on the same bones as the Land Cruiser, the GX quietly became the vehicle recommended by owners who wanted Toyota reliability with a nicer cabin and a dealership experience that doesn't feel like a chore. Consumer Reports has ranked Lexus near the top of its reliability surveys for years running, and the GX specifically benefits from a conservative approach to technology. No bleeding-edge gadgets to fail, just a well-tested V8 or turbocharged inline-six, depending on the generation, paired with a body-on-frame chassis that shrugs off rough treatment. Here's what surprises people, though. The GX isn't marketed as a workhorse. It looks like a luxury SUV. But underneath, it's basically wearing a tuxedo over work boots. Toyota 4Runner. If the GX is the tuxedo version, the 4Runner is the version that never bothered changing outfits in the first place. Toyota kept this SUV on essentially the same platform for over a decade, resisting the urge to modernize it into something more fragile. That decision frustrated reviewers looking for fresh tech. It delighted everyone who just wanted a vehicle that starts every single morning without complaint. There's a reason 4Runners with 300,000 miles still sell for real money on used lots. Buyers know exactly what they're getting, and what they're getting rarely breaks. Off-road guides, overlanding forums, and search and rescue fleets all point to the same pattern. Simple mechanical survive abuse that would destroy anything built around complexity. But durability like this always comes with a trade-off, and the next SUV on this list proves that trade-off can actually work in your favor instead of against you. That trade-off, visible age in exchange for invisible strength, plays out even more clearly in the next SUV, and this one surprises people because it's not even considered an SUV by half the buyers looking at it. Toyota Sequoia, first generation. Nobody talks about the first-gen Sequoia the way they talk about the 4Runner or the Land Cruiser, and that's honestly a mistake. Built between 2000 and 2007 on a stretched Tundra platform, this thing was engineered during Toyota's most conservative, most obsessively tested era. Owners report six-figure mileage with nothing more than routine maintenance: timing belts, fluids, brakes. No transmission failures. No electrical gremlins eating through the dashboard. Here's the twist, though. Because it never had the cult following of the 4Runner, prices stayed low for years. Mechanics who specialize in older Toyotas will tell you the Sequoia is basically the same bulletproof bones wrapped in a body nobody bid up. That's changing now, slowly, as word spreads. But for a driver over 40 who wants 3 rows and zero drama, it's still one of the smartest used buys on this entire list. Honda Pilot, second generation, 2009 to 2015. Now here's where the story shifts away from Toyota completely, because Honda earned its own seat at this table the hard way. The second-gen Pilot fixed almost everything owners complained about in the first generation: better transmission tuning, a more refined V6, fewer electrical quirks. Consumer Reports has repeatedly flagged this generation as one of the more dependable mid-size SUVs on the used market, and independent mechanic surveys back that up. But there's a catch buyers need to know before jumping in. Early versions of the V6 and related Honda and Acura models suffered from cylinder deactivation issues that caused oil consumption problems. Honda addressed most of it through updated software and revised components by 2012. So the real advice isn't just buy a Pilot. It's buy one built after that fix rolled out and get a pre-purchase inspection focused specifically on oil consumption history. Skip that step, and you inherit somebody else's unresolved problem. Subaru Outback 2013 until 2019 non-turbo. This one tends to surprise people because Subaru doesn't have the same bulletproof reputation as Toyota in most reliability conversations. But the non-turbo four-cylinder Outback from this specific window quietly built a following among rural drivers, mail carriers, and anyone who needed real all-wheel drive traction without complicated maintenance. The engine is simple. The AWD system, unlike a lot of competitors, engages constantly rather than reactively, which actually reduces mechanical stress over time instead of increasing it. The turbocharged versions from the same era tell a completely different story, with more reported head gasket and turbo-related repairs. So the lesson buried in this one is specific. Engine choice matters just as much as brand reputation, and the next SUV on this list proves that lesson applies even inside Toyota's own lineup. Subaru's lesson about engine choice, mattering more than badge reputation, carries forward perfectly into the next entry, because this one flips the entire conversation on its head. Toyota Tacoma, third generation, 2016 to 2023. Most reliability lists focus on family SUVs, but the Tacoma earned its spot here because so many over 40 buyers cross-shop it against mid-size SUVs anyway, especially the double-cab versions that function almost identically to a 4Runner. And the numbers back up the hype. Resale value on used Tacomas remains stubbornly high, sometimes absurdly high, specifically because buyers know these trucks routinely cross 250,000 miles with nothing more dramatic than brake jobs and timing chain maintenance. Here's the twist, though, and it's one that used truck shoppers learn the hard way. Early third-gen models suffered from a somewhat sluggish automatic transmission that some owners found frustrating in stop-and-go traffic. It's not a reliability flaw exactly, it's a comfort trade-off. Toyota prioritized long-term durability over refined shifting, and that's a decision that ages well mechanically even if it annoyed reviewers at launch. Honda CR-V, 5th generation, 2017 to 2022, non-turbo. Here's where things get interesting again, because Honda's turbocharged CR-V engines from this era developed a genuine, well-documented issue, oil dilution in cold climates, where fuels seep past piston rings and thin the oil during short winter trips. Honda issued software updates and, eventually, extended warranty coverage to address it. But the non-turbo version, sold mainly in warmer markets and lower trims, never had this problem at all. That's a strange, kind of good news hiding inside bad news. The fix isn't avoiding Honda. The fix is knowing exactly which engine variant you're buying, and that single detail separates a smart purchase from a headache-filled one. Toyota Highlander, third generation, 2014 to 2019. Somewhere between the Tacoma's blue-collar toughness and the Land Cruiser's premium bulletproofing sits the Highlander, and it earns its place through sheer consistency rather than any dramatic story. Consumer Reports and Repair Pal both rank this generation near the top of mid-size three-row SUVs for predicted reliability, and real-world owner forums back that up with an almost boring lack of complaints. No major recalls. No engine sludge scandals. No transmission horror stories circulating online. Boring, in this context, is exactly the compliment it sounds like. A driver over 40 isn't chasing excitement from a family hauler. They're chasing the exact opposite. A vehicle that disappears into the background of daily life and simply works year after year, without ever becoming the topic of a frustrated phone call to a mechanic. But there's one more SUV left on this list, and it might be the most surprising entry of all, because it comes from a brand nobody expects to see mentioned in the same breath as Toyota and Honda. The final entry on this list comes from a brand that spent years fighting a completely different reputation, and that's exactly what makes its inclusion here so unexpected. Ford Escape, fourth generation, 2020 to 2023, hybrid. Ford doesn't usually show up on reliability lists next to Toyota and Honda, and for good reason. The brand's history with dual-clutch transmissions and turbocharged engines in the previous Escape generation left plenty of owners frustrated. But something shifted with the fourth-generation hybrid model. Ford paired a naturally aspirated engine with a conventional hybrid system borrowed conceptually from proven Toyota-style architecture, and the result surprised even skeptical reviewers. RepairPal data on this specific generation shows repair frequency dropping noticeably compared to the previous Escape, and owner forums that used to be filled with transmission complaints have gone strangely quiet. That quiet is the whole story. A brand doesn't earn trust back by announcing it. It earns it back by simply not showing up in complaint threads anymore, year after year, until people stop assuming the worst by default. There's a pattern running underneath every single SUV on this list, and it's worth naming directly before wrapping up. None of these vehicles win because they're exciting. They win because someone, somewhere, made a boring decision, a simpler engine, a proven transmission, a conservative approach to new technology, and stuck with it long enough for the data to prove it right. Drivers over 40 tend to already know this instinctively. The flashiest option in the showroom is rarely the one still running trouble-free a decade later. The real lesson isn't which badge to trust blindly. It's which specific engine, transmission, and model year to trust, because as the Pilot, the CR-V, and the Outback all proved, reliability often hides inside a narrow window of production years rather than an entire model lineup. By the right year, skip the problematic variant and get a pre-purchase inspection before signing anything. That single habit separates the buyers who drive the same SUV for 15 years from the ones posting angry reviews 18 months in. If any of these 9 surprised you, or if you already own one and it's still running strong, that's worth sharing in the comments. Real ownership stories tend to help the next buyer more than any spec sheet ever could. And if this kind of research-backed breakdown is useful, sticking around for the next one means never guessing again when it's time to buy your next SUV.